Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here this evening for the final event in our Humanities Hour series, Writers on Writing Place. I am speaking to you today from Riverside, California, in the heart of the IE, the Inland Empire, aka Inlandia. And today we have the pleasure of hosting two absolutely genius authors, Isabel Quintero and Cassandra Lopez. Inlandia's Humanities Hour presentations have been in partnership with the Riverside Public Library and California Humanities, a nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. I am Katie Porter, and I'm Executive Director of Inlandia Institute, and we are a literary and cultural arts nonprofit based in inland Southern California, the ancestral homelands of the Cahuilla, Gabrielino Tongva, Luiseno, and Serrano peoples. We respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, Inlandia is home to many Indigenous peoples from all over the world, and we express our gratitude to them for allowing us the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. And now, just for a few housekeeping notes, we want you to know that closed captioning is available for this event via the CC icon on the lower part of your screen. And also, please note that this is a view-only presentation, and it is being recorded. If you have any questions for our speakers, please type them into the Q&A box, and we will have a Q&A period toward the end of the hour, around 6:45. And now for our program. This series has looked at the way place influences our writing. As writers, our task is to write the world around us and the world as we see it. And often that begins with right where we stand. We've spoken to a number of different authors during this series. And tonight it really gives me great pleasure to introduce Isabel Quintero and Cassandra Lopez. Isabel Quintero is an award-winning writer and the daughter of Mexican immigrants. She lives and writes in the Inland Empire of Southern California. Gabby, A Girl in Pieces, was her first YA novel, was the recipient of multiple awards. She is the author of chapter books, Ugly Cat and Pablo, and Ugly Cat and Pablo and the Missing Brother. And she also has written photographic about the Mexican photographer Graciela Iturbide, and also has a number of other works coming out, and we are very excited to have her today. Cassandra Lopez is a Chicana and California Indian, Cahuilla, Tongva, and Luiseno writer who has received support from Canto Mundo, Breadloaf, and Jack Straw. She's been selected for residencies with the School of Advanced Research and Hedgebrook. Her chapbook, Where Bullet Breaks, was published by Sequoia National Research Center, and her poetry collection, Brother Bullet, was published by University of Arizona Press. And she's a founding editor of As Us, a space for women of the world, and teaches at Northwest Indian College. So welcome, Cassandra and Isabel, and thank you all for being here tonight.
Hello, good evening. I'm happy to be here tonight virtually with Cassandra, who has a much cooler background than I do. So
I should have put my Bob's Burger background for you in honor of you.
Oh, you should have. I actually have a Tina right here.
Okay.
In front of me, along with other Bob memorabilia. Yeah, so we're going to start off by reading some of our work, and then we have questions for each other. We're going to have a cool conversation. So Cassandra's going to start off the reading tonight. So I'm excited. Take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to read an excerpt from my memoir in progress, which is tentatively titled A Few Notes on Grief. And this is from a longer essay, so I just took some short excerpts. And the chapter is called Lineage. So I was attempting to explain where I'm from, not only like ancestry, but like the place I'm from as well. So I thought it was fitting to read from this. So I am descendant of the Tongva, the traditional people of Los Angeles. I'm also a San Luis Rey, Luiseño, and Kuya descendant. The Tongva and San Luis Rey band of Luiseño Indians lack federal recognition. This complicates tribal enrollment and community. But this is neither the beginning or end of my lineage. I have started to wonder if part of the contemporary Tongva experience is this tension between disconnection and connection. Every day we are reckoning with this history. So unless there is need for clarification, when I introduce myself, I say I am. I say I am both California Indian, Tongva, Kuya, and Luiseño, and Chicana. I say I am, I say I remain, I say, let me tell you a story that neither begins or ends with me. In Tongva, Wachanga means San Bernardino, and Wachavatan means people from San Bernardino. This seems to be the best way to describe myself. I am from a place, and I am that place. If I was asked what part of Mexico Mother's family was from, I could not tell you. This is the work of assimilation and American progress, or the American dream. This is the work of a history of poverty and migration. This is the work of people who believe they can create and shift borders with a simple mark of a map. What I know is that several of my great-grandparents were born in parts of Texas and California, land that Gloria Anzaldúa says was Mexican once, was Indian always, and is and will be again. It is through their stories that I try to fight against amnesia, fight against the sweet anesthetic of miseducation that tried to turn my brain and tongue docile. This is how I will grow up with my homelands all around me, but out of reach. It was others, people from outside my neighborhood, who taught me to be ashamed of where I grew up. They taught it to me through their words and distaste in the tone of their voice when they talked about the local stores, schools, and people, the way some people turned the name San Bernardino into San Bernardino. There is nothing here for you. I've heard it said many times. Look at any comment section on a YouTube video or article about San Bernardino. They say it's a festering cancer. They say San Bernardino has always been a shithole. They say there's no saving San Bernardino. They say downtown is a ghost town, a shell of what it once was. They say I'm working on getting my family out of here. They say I left San Bernardino 26 years ago, and I'm glad I did. God bless everyone there. Just leave. There was a time when I thought I too wanted a fresh start, that it would be easy to forget, but I keep coming back. In school, we learned about the San Andreas fault line, how it runs through the base of the San Bernardino Mountains, how it forms the boundary between the Pacific and North American plates. We learn to duck and cover and stand in doorways. We are told to keep supplies at home, put a pair of shoes near your bed. If I had a map of California, I would trace the length of it. I would begin in the interior of Southern California at the Salton Sea, Cahuilla territory, where my paternal grandparents would go to get away from the city. I would extend my finger across the northern part of the San Bernardino Mountains, near where I went to high school for a special honors program, cut across to the bottom of the San Bernardino Mountains, the Yohavitam territory, the mountains where Father took us fishing, pass through the city near the community college, which was once Politana. The fault lines continue on upwards toward Tongva homelands and through the state until it lands in the Pacific Ocean. School teaches me it is the motion of these plates that cause earthquakes, but there are other stories that attempt to explain the way the earth moves, this expression of energy. One involves turtles and another a man growling. These stories are also a way of knowing and understanding. This region is also intersected by the San Jacinto and Cucamonga fault lines. This is a place with a long history of people converging, so it makes sense to me this is also a place where tectonic plates meet. Due to the lack of resources, many of the buildings in San Bernardino have not been retrofitted to withstand a major earthquake. In a Los Angeles Times article about the issue, the owner of a downtown restaurant says, "If you're gonna die, you're gonna die. Maybe it's cancer, maybe it's an earthquake." This is what San Bernardino has been trying to teach me my whole life. From children and adults, I learned to blame the rains in April or May that seem to happen around the annual Orange Show on an Indian curse. The first National Orange Show was organized in 1911 as a way to promote the citrus industry as an exotic crop. The records note that it rained the whole day. The Orange Show was rebranded the National Orange Show Festival, but the carnival today has little to do with the citrus industry that has once flourished in the region. These days, the National Orange Show Event Center is rented out for large raves and concerts that draw attendees in the thousand. A local article calls the raves a blessing and a curse because while they draw in much needed money to the city, numerous noise complaints come in, some from residents in neighboring towns. I too have grumbled to myself when I'm back home and forget there is a music festival and I'm in the middle of traffic of so many cars from out of town who don't know where they are going. The youthful attendees are easy to spot in their skimpy festival outfits. Many of them sparkle or shine as they walk down San Bernardino's cracked sidewalks. Navel oranges are seedless and easy to peel. The little belly button that I love to savor is a mutation, a conjoined twin. Because these oranges are seedless, to replicate them, their sprouted buds must be grafted into a tree, making every navel tree a clone of the parent. It is these sweet winter fruits that Father tells me not to juice. When we have a particularly good crop, he advises us to eat them whole, to take them as they are. Sometimes the Orange Show curse is blamed on orange groves that were supposedly planted on a cemetery used by Native people. I didn't realize till recently that this rumor was referencing the settlement of Politana, a place where many Cahuillas and Serranos lived before the violence in the settlement caused people to move to Hasahapa. Most of the time, the rumor was that the Orange Show took place on actual burial grounds. Other time, the curse was blamed on the general mistreatment of the local Native peoples, particularly the Yahavatam Serrano, who were in 1866 experienced a 32-day campaign by the militia. During that time, the Yahavatam were shot and killed on sight. Rain is not the most vengeful curse one could invoke on a place, especially a place like San Bernardino. The curse was one of the few times I heard people talk about Native people while growing up. We were acknowledged as existing, but only in the past. We are both the cause of guilt and blame. We ruin a good time. I don't think of any of my ancestors as being particularly vengeful, but now I think, so what if they were? What is a curse but a last-ditch effort for justice and balance by calling upon the spirits? My first impulse is not to invoke a curse. I keep no maledictions handy, but there are times when I am overwhelmed by the totality of my grief. I'm reminded of eldest nephew's smile that does not return easily. And then I think of the possibilities of brothers killers being happy and my insides curl up. After all of these years, the pain comes back quick and ripe, ready to split. The enormity of the loss comes in waves, and when I catch my breath, I want to break something outside of it. I want them to know what they have taken, but that is an impossible task. That is the unsolvable of our situation. Thank you.
Damn, now I don't want to read. That's I love hearing pieces of your memoir because I'm just excited for it to be done. I shouldn't say that to you, but I'm excited for it to be done so I can read the whole thing, because every time you read a chunk from it, I just get like really excited about what you're writing and what you're writing and how you're writing about it. So really excited. I'm going to be reading a short story. I don't know. I'm going to look at the time. I'm going to try to finish it, but it's not a short story. So it's an excerpt from a young adult novel that will be coming out in the next couple of years, called Golden State. But it's from this anthology, Come On In, 15 stories about immigration and finding home. And so 15 of us, so there were 15 writers that were contacted by Adi El Said, and he was the one who edited the anthology. And we didn't have to be immigrants. We could be children of immigrants or somehow connected to immigration. And so what you have here in this book is not what the book has turned into now. It's a different thing. So similar but different. Anyway, so this would have been the beginning of the book, and I'll just start. So is that from Golden State? The part where Madeleine first speaks. My father and Theo's with bloody hands. That is the first memory I have access to. It was my birthday and I was turning 4. I remember a red dress swollen with crinoline and satin, the kind that my parents would have bought at the Chino swap meet on a Sunday after mass. The kind I would have begged for because the shape of the dress made me feel like one of the dolls my dad was always bringing me from his long trips away from home. The hard plastic dolls with movable arms and legs, eyes that opened or shut depending on whether the little baby was lying down or up and about. About 5 feet from the bloody mess of a dead pig that my father and uncles were cutting through, I watched my Tío Jorge carve a smile into the pig's throat, a horrific version of the ones I'd seen spread on the faces of cartoon pigs. Pero la niña, my dad says, looking worried. This is my first slaughter. A la verga, pariente, si estuviéramos en el rancho, ya nos estuviera ayudando. Tío Reinaldo, Marlene's favorite, my favorite tío, second cousin, really teases his youngest primo. But we are not on the rancho. We are in my backyard in Riverside. So I'm going to come back to that when Cassandra and I have a conversation about writing multi-genres, about place. So in Riverside, my legs were so slow to move that I believe I turned into one of those dolls my dad brought me. My once alive arms and legs froze in the upright position. I was unable to look away. My large, unblinking brown eyes opened wide enough to take in every inch of the butchering. That memory, that scene now reminds me of the anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicholas Tulp by Rembrandt, a careful dismembering of a life by hungry hands, a delicate procedure. But there's a more recent connection. Before I associated that memory only with the last squeal heard before the silence, before carnitas, back when my tíos made clear their disappointment for the way their youngest brother was raising his American-born daughter, pobre delicada. The part where the narrator tells you a bit more about La Madeleine, the main character in this story. The girl in this story does not speak Spanish very well. She doesn't really speak it at all, but her tongue lolls its way over ñes and r's, hoping to land on correct pronunciations. It dips its tip in accents twice removed. The girl in this story calls herself Mexican, even though she was born in the United States. She calls herself Chicana. She calls herself American. She calls herself whatever she wants to because she doesn't believe in borders or other people naming her. The girl in this story is brown like her father, arched eyebrows and freckles like her mom, small brown eyes like her great uncle she's never met, whose voice she's heard only on the telephone and through letters. The one who lives in a jacalito in a pueblo whose name her mouth trips over when she tries to pronounce it correctly. Her mom's favorite uncle with the peacocks and incense. She has her grandmother's thick brown hair and her great-grandmother's sternness. She does not smile on command. Her grandmother did it, her mother does it, and neither will she. The girl in the story could give a fuck what you think and less fucks about the labels you think she should adorn herself with. She doesn't care if she makes you uncomfortable. She is not here to make you feel good. The part where the narrator gives you a synopsis. Madeleine is about to embark on a journey. She has just found out that her father has another family he's kept hidden in the same damn state. The same fucking state, but up north. Can you believe that shit? Dude kept another entire family in Northern California. Madeleine didn't know what made her look up her genealogy on one of those Find Your Ancestors websites. But you know how sometimes you do things almost without thinking because it's like your subconscious is guiding you, leading you to some higher truth. Well, she was high, and luckily so, because when she saw that her father, Doroteo Hidalgo, was recently divorced and had a son, she felt the weight of everything on her shoulders. Had she not been high, she would have lost her goddamn mind. Madeleine calls her carnala del alma, her good friend Loli, and says, read this shit. Loli does. Both of them fall silent. You don't say jack shit because there are no fucking rules for this. But like I said, Madeleine is about to embark on a journey to find her brother. She's going on this trip with Memo, her best friend. Loli would be going too, except she's too busy getting ready to move into her dorm in a college far, far 3 states over in Texas. Madeleine has tried not to think about what Loli's departure means for their friendship. She is not so naive to think that it will stay the same, but how far apart they will drift is hard to predict. Besides Memo, Loli Williams has been her closest friend since 1st grade, but unlike Loli, and to the disappointment of her parents, Madeleine doesn't have a plan for the future or a plan they approve of. In any case, Loli has her shit together and Madeleine doesn't, and maybe that's a good thing because if she did, she wouldn't have time to look for a long lost brother she didn't know about. First, she has to pick up Memo, who's about to get out of jail, but will turn out to be the first time. They don't know that yet, though. They don't know that for a long time. They don't know that for a long time, so maybe we shouldn't even talk about that. Maybe we should only worry about the immediate future, the one that ends with hope. Madeleine thinks about Memo as she packs burritos, clothes, weed, supplies, and music. The part in which the narrator tells you about when Madeleine threw a brick at Memo's head, splitting his eyebrow and leaving a permanent scar. When she was about 4 years old, Madeleine threw a brick at Memo's head. It wasn't an entire brick. At least she doesn't think it was a whole brick, just a large chunk of one. They were playing in Memo's backyard and their parents were inside making ceviche. It was sweltering. It was a sweltering day in Corona, the next city over for Madeleine. It's probably August when the heat feels like it will never leave. And so your parents turn on the sprinklers for you to run through and cool off. That is to say, it was a perfect day to be a 4-year-old in this particular backyard. And this was true until Madeleine threw the brick. There is no consensus on the what of the argument that led Madeleine to reach for what had been left behind after Memo's father had built a planter for his wife's herb and Chile garden. Memo argues that Madeleine just picked up the brick out of nowhere because she knew he wouldn't fight back. Madeleine claimed he wouldn't fight back. Madeleine claims that Memo said something about throwing like a girl. In her memory, they had been playing catch. So she did. In any case, the brick left Madeleine's hand with enough force to split his eyebrow. Memo was a bloody mess while Madeleine stood there, frozen by what she had done, but only for a moment. In the next second, she ran to help her screaming best friend, using her hands and her shirt to try and stop the bleeding. The crying and screams had signaled to her parents to rush inside. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Madeleine couldn't find other words. Madeleine's mom yelled at Madeleine, why? I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. The parents threw the kids in the car and drove. Memo's mom in the backseat, still putting pressure on her son's wound, something she would always do. Madeleine was in the backseat too, her little hand interlocked with Memo's, making sure he was still there, that she hadn't gotten rid of him. Madeleine doesn't remember all of it, mostly just the part where she threw the brick and the part where she held his hand. She thinks about this from time to time when she and Memo hang out, and even when they don't, because that's how guilt works. He likes to joke about it, pointing to his scar. Remember this? And I think I'm going to leave it there so we have time for a conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this new YA, right? Right book?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you write children's, middle grade, poetry. so all all these genres, and that was a question that we wanted to discuss, is like, how do we go writing about setting or home? Like, what considerations as multi-genre writers, right, do we have when writing about home, for you in a YA setting, or YA versus maybe your picture book, or
Yeah, so we had talked about this a little bit before, and so the reason I said I'll come back to Riverside is that I write all of these books, and all of these books I'm writing about the IE in some way, right? Unless it's not, unless it's something like photographic, that's nonfiction, that's a biography about somebody else, or in certain situations. But my books, whether it's Ugly Cat and Pablo, which is about a cat and a mouse who are friends, right? Like, it's all set in the IE. And like, I've decided though recently that I think I'm going to set all of my books in the same city, and I'm going to change the name. So it won't be Riverside, it won't be Corona, it'll be San Coyote. Like, that's what I think I've come to, that's what I'm going to name the city where I want to write all of my stories, regardless of genre, right? So you're going to have a lot of things happening, paranormal things happening. This young adult story, Golden State, is going to be happening. So all of it, so it's going to be like a complete world. And I wanted to do that because, sometimes setting is hard, and because I want to, like, I purposely want to write about the IE, it just makes it easier to have like one location, like one place that I'm imagining or creating or building. And I don't know, like, I don't think it's that hard, like, and I'm cursing myself now, right? Like, talking about curses, I don't think it's that hard, it's gonna be easy. It because everything is a story, right? Like, what I'm interested in writing, regardless of genre, even in poetry, is a good story. Like, that's what I'm after in whatever I write. And my good stories happen to happen in the Inland Empire, right? Because this is where I was born and raised. I was, and I've lived my whole entire, I haven't lived anywhere else but here, and just different cities within the Inland Empire. And so I wanted to bring all of that to any genre that, that I'm writing.
and when you told me that, I was so excited. I was like thrilled by that idea, because I feel like even one city, there can be different experiences people have within that city, depending where they live, depending like kind of like their kind of daily routine and all that. So I can imagine, for me, it was like easy to imagine that there are people who experience these supernatural elements, and then people who live in this very realistic world, and they all are living within the same place.
Yeah.
They just have these different kind of experiences there, but the sort of topography is the same, or what have you. I don't know. I was just really thrilled by this idea that you shared that.
Yeah, me too. Like, I hope I stay thrilled. Like, because I think, and you're right. Like, within our city, there are so many things within our cities, right? Like, within the Inland Empire. Like, I think, excuse me, one of the things that really chaps my butt is when people, when the people do talk shit about living here, right? As if like every city here is like the same thing, right? And I don't know, as if we're all, I remember my ex-husband once saying, because he lived in LA County, and him talking about like when he first went over Kellogg Hill, how he was like, oh, there's more here. Like, I thought it was like mole people out there. Like, really? Like, that's what, and I hear that like all the time, that people are surprised. People are surprised that there is like good restaurants or like museums or like stuff happening over on this side. And it's like, yeah, things are always happening. And like, that's my intent to like within my work to show all of those things that are happening, right? All of the life that is happening, like whether it's supernatural, whether it's realistic, like whether it's kids or adults, life is happening and their stories.
Yeah, and that kind of segues into the other topic that we wanted to talk about is representing the IE
Mhm.
and like how I guess there is that kind of, I feel sometimes I want to push against some of the narratives or stereotypes. At the same time, I do want to capture the essence, and some of those like are the kind of gritty things or the not so great things that we see, right? And so for me, you know, I don't want to turn away from that, but I guess trying to capture that larger picture there, right? Like I can think, so fortunately, because of the pandemic, I've been able to be home in San Bernardino a lot more because I teach online. And
Mhm.
so I've been able to feel like be a lot more connected.
Mhm.
And like I love seeing that we have like in San Bernardino like vegan Sundays, like, right? That's great. That's like so great to me. And then there's also like I feel like where there is creativity is necessary, you have it. Like you have all the little taco places pop up in the middle of where there's nothing, right? Or a kettle corn in a parking lot, or the, you know, I love them, you know, like you have, I mean, and that's a certain vibrancy that I think could be looked down upon, right? Um, so, but I don't think it should have, right?
Yeah, but by
Because
who? And like, should we
yeah,
care? Like, so you don't want tacos from a parking lot? Well, there's more tacos for me. Like, I don't know. Like,
yeah. I remember when a friend visited me from San Francisco and she was sitting on our porch, and then like the Lotte man went by, somebody else. She was like, "Oh, you got this right in your, you know, this all this right on your street here." I was like, "Oh yeah." So yeah, I think for me, I've always felt it challenging to try to replicate like the dialogue and from in it's I don't know if it's an accent or just the way people I grew up talk. Um and sometimes it's very subtle, and I remember hearing like being like on a call or something with a cousin, like after I had been away from home for a while, and hearing her voice, and there was just something to the cadence of it that sounded like home to me. Um, but I think I find that very difficult to capture. And so I guess like that is the challenge about, and one of those things that I want to improve upon. But yeah, I think that there I'm definitely trying to push or build past some of the stereotypes while also still acknowledging them and still like presenting them in a more developed way, I guess.
yeah, that's interesting about like the accents and capturing how people sound from here, right? And I think, um, like I haven't been away long enough to like hear that. Like I know, like I've been told before I have an accent, like that I have a Southern California Chicana accent. Like that's cool. Like I don't know what I sound like,
Yeah.
or like I know I don't sound like an LA Chicana,
Mhm.
right? Like that I don't sound like that. Um, but like trying to capture that in writing. And now like you're making me think about like how we like assume people speak in a book, unless it's like specifically marked, right? Like this person has an accent, and then like not everyone is going to answer. Although I will say that in this, in what I just read, I didn't read the part where they go to the jail in Banning, and they get on the 10. But I did ask them to please put a footnote for those non-native Californians, where in most parts of the US, folks say Interstate 10 or I-10 when talking about interstate. In California, we usually say the 10 or the 91, right? So like I like those little things, like I make sure to like mark or point out, so you know that this is like someone from California and this is how they're speaking. But like accents within our own region, like I hadn't thought about that. But you did say a couple of things that I wanted to like ask you about. You know, you don't live out here right now, right? And so like whenever we talk, you know, it's like, oh, I'm going to go back home, right? Or like right now you said you were talking to your cousin who's back home. And so then, right, like, and earlier when you were reading your essay, you mentioned something, and I forgot what the word is, but is I am from a place, I am that place, right? Like, which I thought was like pretty awesome, because if you're not just from a place, but you are that place, then it elevates, I feel like, the respect that you have for where you're at, right? Like your surroundings, like the people that are around you, that maybe someone who isn't of that place is going to have like the same kind of respect for where you're from. But then how do those two things, you know, when you're talking about like home, like how do you define home? How do you see place? And then how do you see place within your writing? You know, like how has that changed from moving? Because, you know, you're in New Mexico and then out in Cornell and then out, you know, in Pacific Northwest now. Like, does that shift for you? How you see home or how you write about home?
I think, well, and I write about this in my memoir. Like, I really wanted to escape San Bernardino, right? I think I was kind of fed into that, right? That idea that there's nothing here for you, or there's other things that are better for you outside. And so, you know, and I think of it as kind of like imagination too, like, right? And so going away for my first time, I really wanted to, but then I became really homesick. And I think that first time really helped me appreciate where I was from. I could see it a little bit differently. And then since then, it's been a constant, I feel like a constant migration, a back and forth, a back and forth. You know, I feel like I am in diaspora, right? Like that is my reality. That I live, that I live, you know, and in some ways it does feel natural for me to be in migration. Like that sort of feels kind of natural for me, but I do, but I, yeah, and I think, especially, as I said, I have a lot more respect, and I think I do can see it from different eyes now, and I think also part of that too, because my parents and my paternal grandparents lived in the area, so I also in some ways see it from their perspectives as well, because I have their stories, and I have, like, I can hear and I can imagine in my mind the way things looked, the way they experienced things. So I have, even though I physically didn't see how things were at that time, in some way, I also hold that within me as well. And I think that's partly why I feel like I am the place, versus while I love Washington and it's given me many opportunities, I am a guest. I feel like a guest here. And so in some ways I can appreciate it as a guest, right? Like there's something so awesome about flying in to Seattle or Bellingham from so I I've flew in from Albuquerque before, which is like brown. I flew in Palm Springs also to somewhere that's so like lush and green, and there's so much water all around, right? Seeing that from above is like, you saw it, you've seen that too. Also adds to that literal appreciation of the place.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about landing, like usually, like it's a weird feeling. Obviously for the last few years, 3 years now, almost 2 years, haven't been traveling. But when I would travel more, landing in Ontario airport, just seeing like the sea of warehouses, like I'm like, oh, I know I'm home, right? Like I know I'm home. But it's also really sad to see how many more there is like each time, right? How many more warehouses are kind of encroaching upon our communities and our cities as a whole. But that's a different conversation, I think, about warehousing
That
and how much I
changing.
hate it.
Yeah, the changing not only physical landscape, but what it means for the people here, right?
The physical body, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And a type of, also requires a type of work that's very hard on the body as well, and on the environment and all of that. Yeah, I think we
yeah.
could go really off
Yeah.
topic.
Well, the last thing I'll say about that is I think that the fact that we have so many warehouses here, and what it does require of the bodies that work within them, which are often brown and black bodies that are working in them, I think is a testament to what the outside world thinks about our communities, right, of our cities, that we are disposable, that those people out there, their air doesn't matter, their commute doesn't matter, their communities don't matter. So, but yeah, like it is
just like the resources, disposable, like humans also. I think we could both say a lot about
that.
So you want to address this question that came in
that Shelley has? So Shelley is asking, hey Shelley, every time I try to include place, specifically the IE in my writing, it feels clunky and forced. How do you include those markers and moments so that they flow naturally in the piece? I think, or you want to answer that? You want to go first?
I think it depends on genre too, because I know in my poetry collection, there's sometimes where I could put it in the title, right? And that would kind of give a little bit of direction, right? Titles are great for that. And poetry. And I did have like some I had gotten some feedback about like, oh, like when you write about New Mexico, it's like you're very specific about the place, but not so much the ones about the IE. And I think for me is because I was like, that was so close to my memory that it just like didn't occur to me to be as specific, right? And so I had to do that work to incorporate it in there. And yeah, it did, because it was coming back afterwards, kind of was a little bit more difficult to do that. But I think it improved those poems that I was more specific about the place.
Yeah, I'm thinking, and I don't remember the title of your poem. It's the one about fishing at the lake, I think.
Oh yeah.
Right. But like, yeah, I think that you do really good. I don't remember if the title is in the poem or not, but like, where you're at. Yeah, like you can feel like the different locations.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I agree. Like it maybe it depends like how you're using place, right? Like what role does place play within your story? and if, or story or poetry or poem or whatever, like what role does it play? And if it's just being used as like kind of like background noise, then it might be clunky. But if there's something specific about the place, right? Like in the story I just, the excerpt I just read, I talk about like a dress like from the Chino swap meet, right? Like,
Mhm.
and if you are, so that, like, I don't know who else, but like I grew up going to the Chino swap meet. Like that's, you know, a weekends my parents would take us and we'd go to the swap meet. My grandparents would go with us. We'd go to like the OG cardenas, pick up some carnitas and go to this park and like sit and eat carnitas and with warm tortillas and stuff. And so it's a very visceral and important memory and place for me. And so maybe looking for like ways that you connect to the different places and thinking about those emotions, like those specific emotions or feelings that you have with the place that you're trying to use, right? I don't know if that makes sense or
Yeah,
not,
I
but
and I think it could be something little like a detail like that. Um, where and I used to feel like, well, no one really knows San Bernardino, so why or the Inland Empire? Why should like it's going to confuse people or it will like take away, right? So should just keep it generic, right? Or but there's something I remember reading a short story collection and the person mentioned Stater Brothers and like for someone who's from the area was like Stater Brothers, yay! Like I know like, but then I don't think for other people who are not from the area, I don't think it takes away from it, right? Um, you know, you can understand from the context clues that it's a grocery store, right? Or
yeah,
so I think just finding those, sometimes it's just those little details, right? And other times, yes, it's more like the geography that sort of add together to all these things, right? Like the freeways and, you know, certain vegetation or what have you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think for me, I've tried like, right, like obviously I know there's like stuff that needs improvement, like any city, right? Like any city, like any cities, any communities, like there's things that need to be worked on and then things that are great, right? And so like I think we both embrace those things. But I also think that like there was a turning point for me when, because I think I had similar feelings like no at first, right, like years ago, before I decided like that my stories were going to be based in the IE about
Mhm.
um like nobody's going to care or nobody's going to know, right? But like writers from LA, writers from different places, like, you know, big cities, like they name streets, they
Yeah.
act like we should know where Figueroa is, like they like name stuff all the time, right? And so why can't we see our communities as places that should be named, right? Or should be treated in this way as something like, yeah, like I am an insider and if you get the Stater Brothers reference, right, then you get the Stater Brothers reference. If not, then, and you want more information, you could go look it up like we all do, right? And so I think seeing our area in that way, as in like it is an area to be elevated and to be put in books and to be
Yeah, yeah,
something,
it
you know,
deserves
like,
to be there. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so just treat it as such. And I think that it won't, you know, sound as clunky. I
I'm
don't know.
looking at these two other questions
Mhm.
and like one was talking about um their experience being migrant workers during the summer and having these different experiences, right? With
Mhm.
place. And I think also, yeah, the time period. Some people have very positive experiences about San Bernardino, or maybe like I mentioned, like I had a roommate in college who like was from LA, but only like the only thing she was like knew about San Bernardino was Santa's Village, right? So something, you know, kind of like have those various experiences. And my on my mother's side, my family was also migrant workers. So there is a lot of family members up and down the Central Valley, right? So it's sort of like this continuation of family, right? That's not only in San Bernardino, but like Bakersfield, Fresno, like there's that sort of continuation because of, farm work and all and labor and what else.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'm like, my parents were born in Mexico. I'm the daughter of Mexican immigrants, um, and so they didn't work in the fields here. They worked in the fields in Mexico. I think maybe they worked a little bit here, um, but most of it was in Mexico. Um, and so, yeah, I think there is a difference, and there's also a difference in experience. And like my parents are brown, like, got brown skin, and I'm light skinned, and so my experiences in the IE is going to be different than their experience in the IE because of that. And but also I like listening to my parents talk about before the freeway was here or before this was here, and like I find myself um talking that way too, right? Like, so like
Yes, there's been so much change. Even when I come back, I was like, oh, this is different. Or when did they put that up? Or what?
yeah, so I think my parent, like my mom was born in Mexico, Guanajuato, and she spent most of her life here now because she got here when she was like 20. But she wants to be buried in Corona. Like, she doesn't like want to go back, even if she's dead.
Yeah, so she's made it her home. Like
She's
she
made it her home. Yeah. And
feels,
so, yeah, we have another question. Y'all
yeah.
talked a little about being in diaspora. How does that impact your sense of place in general, and more specifically, the sense of home? What tools do you use to explore this while writing? Thanks for your time. Loved hearing your pieces. Thanks for that, Rima.
Yeah, I think so yeah, so I as I said, I definitely have that experience of feeling, and yours might be a little bit different, but I think I've also been interested. So I feel like I am very interested in learning about the history of San Bernardino and California because it wasn't really taught to me very well in school. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm like, and so it's been great to like connect the family stories with the more of the history and see how those parts are connected. But also living somewhere else, I get to learn stories or learn the history of a place, right? And that's just as important and are even in some ways sometimes more important into, especially as I'm working with tribal students and connecting with them. So like I find myself and I also find there's a lot of similarities, right? Um, and a lot because, you know, when we the formation of the states, usually a very very violent time in history. There was also, you know, there we have there's some shared similarities, even though this distinct, you know, there's some distinctness there going
Mhm.
on. So you know, I think I've been really interested in learning, and like I'm not a historian, but I'm like trying to put those pieces together. Um, that, you know, that wasn't provided with in my K through 12.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I'm first generation here, and it's strange because like I it's something that I always thought about, but now that I have a son, like I think about that in a different sense because like he's not the child of an immigrant, right? Like he's going to have a different kind of way of life than I had, right? Because I don't have the same um issues that like my parents had to deal with. Like I haven't had to deal with, um like immigration raids or like getting my papers or anything like that, right? So it's a he's not going to have to translate for me, like I'm starting to think about place a little bit different too because of him. um but he's also like, I think about it a lot. Like, I have like all the words in my head right now going, and I'm trying to make them make sense. So right, like sometimes I think about like, I'm only here because my parents had to migrate because of imperialism, and I'm like, what would my life be if I had been born in Mexico? Like, what would my life look like, right? And I feel sometimes like so far away from a home that I have never known, right? And like I have only visited, like I've only ever been a guest, like you were talking about earlier, like I've only ever been a guest in a place that, if not for my parents' financial situation, would have been my home, right? And so those are things that I've been thinking about recently when we talk about diaspora. Like, what does that mean for me, right? Like, and even further, by like not knowing anything, or not yet learning about any kind of indigenous ancestry, like that, like my great grandmother, right, like may have had. So it's like even further. And like, so what does that mean? Where am I? Who am I? Questions I'm constantly like asking myself because of this displacement, right? But also choosing to stay here, because choosing to stay in this place. So anyway, I don't know if that question that answered the question that Rima asked, but yeah. And that question, Liz has a question for you, Cassandra.
Okay. So I am doing research. Some of it, like I talk about in that essay or that chapter, I go into a lot more detail about the Orange Show, probably more than anybody wanted to know. And so there's elements like of that, of like, that kind of local, but also like about the formation of California, and about certain laws that were, very racist and policies. And I, just there's this, and part of it is like, yes, I think it adds an element to my work, but some of it may be me just finding a way to talk about the difficult parts, right? So I'm like working on a essay or a chapter that is about like sewing, and about, my mother and grandmother worked in a sweatshop when I was growing up, when I was young, right? But in that essay I also have like information about like how many people are hurt in factory work, and information about from a sewing book, an old sewing book I got. So it just to add to the development of it. And I wouldn't say COVID in some way has hampered, because there's some people that I want to talk to, like family members. And unfortunately, some of my older family members have passed away during this time. And that's really sad. There's a lot of communities that have a lost elders or a lost, people. And that's like knowledge, right? That's a loss of knowledge. And so that has happened during this time. Like, and so, and I feel that, I really feel that. And I know a lot of communities have experienced this. So I would say that has as well. But I also have people in my family who are like really supportive and want to help me, and like want to provide pictures, to provide, information, stories. So I appreciate all that.
And I see that we're wrapping up, that Katie mentioned that in the chat. There was one more question, but I don't think we have time to answer that, Juanita.
Yes, maybe we'll meet for coffee one day and we will be able to chat. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wish we had more time. I know we could keep going. This was really a wonderful conversation. I had questions too. I mean, I've been jotting things down as we've been talking. I want to hear more about San Coyote. But I just, at this point, I want to say thank you both to Isabel and to Cassandra. And I did put some links in the chat if you want to find out more about our authors, our guests. And I hope that we will see you all here again next time. And until then, stay safe and keep writing and look for their books. Go buy books. So,
Bye.
all right.
Bye. Thank you,
guys.
everyone. Thank you. Bye. Have a good
wonderful
night.
everybody.
You as well.